The Irish Rovers are an Irish-Canadian band formed in Toronto, Canada. Their story begins in Ballymena, County Antrim, Northern Ireland, and young brothers Will and George Miller immigrating to Canada. The boys came from a musical household. Growing up quite poor, they would often make their own music to pass the time. Their father played the button-keyed accordion, and their early days were often filled with music and merriment. Upon moving to Canada, 16-year-old George met with Jimmy Ferguson, who was 23 at the time, and the two sang together at an Irish gathering. This was the first official Irish Rovers gig, although they didn't play under the Irish Rovers name yet. George's cousin, Joe Miller, would later immigrate to Canada. Him being a musician, he joined the group as well. At the time, Jimmy would sing, George was the guitarist, and Joe would play the accordion. Together, they truly formed the Irish Rovers. In the meantime, George's brother Will had formed his own calypso group called the Calypso Q's. He followed the Call of the Caribbean and found himself in San Fernando. He would later return to Canada and become a TV star, hosting his own children's show. While living in Calgary, he received a not-so-short visit from George, Jimmy, and Joe. Will ended up joining the band, and the four toured Canada, playing at coffee houses and pubs day and night. Now would be a good time to mention the name of the group. The Irish Rovers were named after a fictional ship that was the subject of a song by the same name. The ship unfortunately met its salty demise, and Will would often joke that the band would meet the same fate if it carried on with that name. Regardless, the name stuck throughout the decades. Eventually, Will became the leader of the band, and they traveled to America, playing gigs at taverns and clubs across California. After playing at DiNucci's Tavern, they were invited to audition at the Purple Onion in San Francisco. This was a major success, as they would play sold-out gigs for an impressive 22 weeks. The group would go on to release their first album in 1966, the first of the Irish Rovers, recorded at the Ice House in Pasadena. This album was successful enough for the Rovers to produce another. This album included the song The Unicorn, written by American poet and songwriter Shel Silverstein. The group would later build a pub called The Unicorn in Calgary, and perform there regularly. Accordion player Wilson McDowell joined the group after Joe left to earn a more stable income for his family. One night, after a successful trip through Colorado, Will was driving the group to Detroit. He heard Glenn Campbell's guitar on the radio, the opening to The Unicorn. Lo and behold, it was the Irish Rovers. They'd made their first hit. Will woke up his sleeping bandmates and pulled over to the side of the road. They celebrated a milestone that would help them become the Irish Rovers we know and love today. After the success, Joe rejoined the group, and the Irish Rovers became 5. This lineup would go on to win numerous awards and even host their own CBC television series starting in 1971. They would invite a range of guest stars, from the Clancy brothers to Lonnie Donegan, and even Anne Murray and Johnny Cash. This TV show, appropriately titled The Irish Rovers Show, was a major factor in the folk music revival in the US and Canada. They also appeared in other shows including The Beachcombers and The Dating Game. The Irish Rovers Show entertained both adult and child audiences alike. Their shows had special segments featuring 3 leprechauns, Will Miller as Willie, Jimmy Ferguson as Bun Warrior, and George Miller as Twerp. These segments were called Tales to Warm Your Mind, and were meant to entertain younger audiences while still maintaining the folky element of the main portion of their shows. The group even filmed several on-location specials in another one of their TV series, where they traveled to places including Ireland and New Zealand and sang traditional songs. In 1981, they released their next major hit, Wasn't That a Party?, written for the band by folk singer Tom Paxton. This song became an international hit, and marked the beginning of a new era for the Irish Rovers. In 1994, Will left the group to pursue other creative interests, including painting. Will continues to create marvelous oil paintings, focusing on his boyhood days in the Ireland of the past. He also formed a new musical group called Some Mad Irishmen in the later 90s, and they would go on to record a couple of albums together. He would later record a few solo albums, and even appeared as Jimmy McVeigh on the Canadian TV series The Red Green Show. Unfortunately, in 1997, Jimmy Ferguson passed away due to heart problems. He was only 57 at the time. Later, Joe Miller left the group, but was soon replaced by his son Ian Miller. The band has gone through many changes over the years, and newer members like Bobby O'Donovan and John Reynolds came and went as time progressed. Still, the group has managed to become one of the most famous Irish folk groups of all time, even playing at the Sydney Opera House and Carnegie Hall. The group still tours today and are just as lively as always. For years, it has been debated whether or not the Irish Rovers can be considered an Irish band. Some argue that since they were formed in Toronto, they are more of a Canadian band. Others argue that their Irish heritage and focus on traditional Irish music proves that they are an Irish band. George Miller, who is still a lead singer with the group, addressed this debate in his song Band Without a Country from their 2020 album Saints and Sinners. He basically explains that whether they have a country to claim them or not, they will always be the Irish Rovers. It has been 60 years now since the Irish Rovers formed in Toronto, 1963, and I wish them a lucky many years to come. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to make a more detailed version of this video in the near future, but that's it for today. Bye for now!